בכבוד רבנו.
So, as we have, I believe it's this week's shiur and next, before we will take a little hiatus, I figured we would be criminally remiss not to take a few topics from Eshet Chayil, which is actually the 31st chapter of Mishel. It's the final chapter of Sefer Mishel. It's really one of the most powerful and versatile chapters in the entire Sefer, in the sense that Eshet Chayil can be applied to individuals, can be applied to, if you look at the Mefarshim, you talk about Am Yisrael HaKadosh Baruch Hu, about the Imahot, about virtuous, righteous women in general. Very interesting how a book called Mishel would conclude with the praise of the specifically female essence. In other words, you would think, and in fact, you'll notice there are a lot of references to this throughout the Sefer. Shema b'ni musar avicha v'al titosh Torah timecha, one of the more famous psukim in Mishel, which is, hear my son, the rebuke of your father, v'al titosh Torah timecha, and don't abandon the Torah of your mother, where your father is specifically associated with musar and the mother is associated with Torah. You learn Torah from your mother. It's a certain aspect, a certain angle. There's a body, a corpus of Torah that you pick up from your mother. Beautiful anecdotes that's really worth starting with. You can find, I believe they've transcribed it already, you should be able to find it on the internet, the hesped, the eulogy that Rav Soloveitchik gave of his mother after she was niftaret. I think this was, if I'm not mistaken, at the Shloshim. I'll double check, but I believe it was at the Shloshim. And he gave a very long, very detailed eulogy where he explained the difference between his father and his mother and the Torah that he learned from both of them. They're both from tremendously learned families. They're both from prominent rabbinic families in Lithuania. And the way he explained it was like this. He said, I learned the halachot of Shabbat from my father. I learned the do's and the don'ts, the ins and the outs, what's mutar, what's asur, the nature of the melachot, what's derived and deduced, and what results from all this study, comparison, contrast, the tremendous theoretical aspect of the Shabbat, the intellectual, theoretical aspect of the Shabbat, I picked up from my father. He said, what I learned from my mother was what Shabbat tastes like. That's how he says it. I learned that Shabbat has a taste, that Shabbat has a smell, that Shabbat has an atmosphere, that Shabbat has an ambiance to it. Something that I could never have learned from, only from my father. So where his father was teaching him the theoretical applications of the Shabbat, his mother lived Shabbat. She observed these halachot, but she was the one who dedicated certain foods and certain drinks and certain meat dishes and certain desserts. So he describes this in great detail. It reminds me of the Havdil, but à la recherche du temps perdu, author's a piece of work in himself, Marcel Proust, but Jewish nonetheless. In the Madeleine of his grandmother. So he describes La Havdil. Proust was discussing, of course he was Jewish, naturally. Well, he gives. Yeah, I believe so. That's the other.
What did you say about it? He was gay as well. Jewish and gay?
A little bit. So happens. So at any rate, but the literature is beautiful. This you have to admit, and for that matter, fashion. Let's be honest. So he writes. Proust writes about how it's a very associative piece, very well written. Where he describes the smell of the Madeleine. They have a little bit of orange zest in them. I guess that's what set the whole thing off. And the smell takes him back to his childhood, and he begins to associate. It's a whole long free association kind of stream of consciousness, they would call this in modern literature. So Soloveitchik describes how the theory is the theory, and when it came to things actually being practiced, to things being manifest, evident, perceptible, this was all thanks to his mother. How the cooking and the baking started, Friday morning, how the house was full of certain smells, how this permeates everything that it changes his tefillah, it changes the way he learns. The mood is more relaxed. On the one hand, there's a tension of getting things done, but at the same time, You already have this appetite. You already have this desire. Like it was thanks to his mother. He was saying that he couldn't wait till Shabbat started. Couldn't wait for Kiddush. Couldn't wait to begin to enjoy the Shabbat. And enjoying the Shabbat, he specifically associates with her. So this is actually a very deep eulogy, a very deep discussion that he gave on the topic, where really, in the more abstract sense, this is the difference between abstraction and theory, academic discussion, if you will, and tangible, palpable, perceptible practice. And this is what we associate with the Shekhinah. The Shekhinah is a presence. It's not something you can measure, it's not something you can quantify, and at the same time, the Shekhinah represents everything. When things are done right, there's a certain feel to them, there's a certain mood to them. We've discussed this in the past. I'll give you two more examples of this, just because the discussion really is a discussion of the Shekhinah, and the woman of Olam Hazeh, or what we would say would be the feminine expression of divinity. In other words, how much godliness can you represent as a human being? As a man, only so much. As a woman, only so much. The feminine side of spirituality would reflect what we come to associate with the Shekhinah. It's an abstract concept. There are two, I would say, relatively easy ways to try to capture this concept. One, Chazal said by Mitzrayim, when we were preparing to leave Egypt. So the Psukim describe Biyad Chazaka Uvmora Gadol. We read this in the Haggadah, right? Uvmora Gadol, Uvotot Shvatim. So Mora Gadol, literally Yad Chazaka is a strong hand. So Hashem definitely dealt the Egyptians very difficult and powerful and challenging plagues, punishments. So the punishments themselves were one thing. If a disaster, a calamity happens, you can see the physical damage done by it. So the pasuk, as we interpret it in the Haggadah, Uvmora Gadol, that this was all done with literally a tremendous fear. And this fear, Chazal said, Zeh Gilui Shekhinah. So what does that have to do with Shekhinah? Why is fear of any kind associated with the Shekhinah? What's the logic behind this? This is not the Madeleine of Marcel Proust, Havdil. It's not Rav Soloveitchik's mother's chicken soup and gingerbread cookies. This is tremendous fear. So the facts themselves on the ground are one thing. The mood set by these facts, the mood set by these events, the effect this has on the neshama is tremendous fear. You can't measure it. It's inexplicable. You can't even explain why you would be afraid. In other words, this is as if to say, I was more afraid than just, this wasn't a coincidence that my animals died, or that the locusts came, or that it's really dark outside. This is fear like, I don't even know what's coming next. This is really bad, it's only getting worse, and I am petrified by what I assume is going to come next. So the Shekhinah, in that sense, is its presence, the divine presence is felt here in a negative way by the subconscious impact, the subconscious translation, if you will, of the physical facts that be on the ground. So if you were to survey the Egyptians at this time, send them like a survey monkey thing by email, and they would tell you on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm scared 1,000,000. Why? I don't even know, but this is freaking me out. And it's not so much a collection of all the facts and events and occurrences that brought me to this. I can feel there's something much bigger to it. And this is a sense of the Shekhinah. It's a negative manifestation of it, right? In the same way that sometimes a child is afraid when his father comes home and sees that he threw stuff out of the window on the balcony onto the scaffolding where the workers are doing some construction. So
the story may or may not have happened.
Which right, any resemblance to people alive or dead is purely Hashqafah Pratiyah, divine providence. So a child fearing his or her mother or father coming home, in a sense, has to do with this. How is that? Because my father's not home yet. I know that my father is a patient man, and I know that his patience has limits. I'm concerned for what might happen when he comes, because I realize that although he's not currently present, I'm about to feel his presence in all kinds of very pleasant and lovely ways. So I have a fear that goes beyond what's actually happening. So what's the big deal? Technically, if someone were shooting a documentary or reality TV, okay, so the kid threw something, out the window. But then you have this fear inside you, like, I know I did something wrong. I can feel I did something wrong. I haven't been punished for it. I haven't been chastised or admonished for it. It's like my embarrassment, my shame is already painful to me. I can feel it that way. And that's perceiving something that isn't there yet. It's not prophetic, but it's how these things begin. Other more positive manifestations of the Shekhinah being felt or being perceived, you'll find by Har Sinai, by Matan Torah, how the Midrashim explain that the mountain all of a sudden began to flower, how there were physical manifestations that didn't make sense, and there was something barely perceptible. There was something, like there are other mountains around. This wasn't the highest of all of them, but there's something different about it. And you could feel it, you could perceive it if you were sensitive to this. The real root of that particular discussion happens to be where? Involving another mountain, but not this one. A little further north, where there's a mountain with a certain divine presence on it that not everyone perceives. I'll give you two examples. One of them is much easier to reach than the other.
When Moshe found the bush.
The sneh.
Yeah.
The sneh is burning. Very good. According to the Rambam, this was a prophetic vision achieved in a dream, so someone else there wouldn't have seen it. He was being shown in an image. He was being shown. It's not clear, in fact, how he would. At what point Moshe prophesied while he was awake. But it was a prophecy, and he holds that all these prophecies happened while one was asleep.
Not the one with also.
But it could well be that others would interpret that he was awake. By Bilam, you see clearly that he had to fall and kind of pass out in order to prophesy. I'm talking about something a little bit earlier than this. If you're familiar with the story of the Akedah. Har Moriah, what happens? Hashem speaks to Abraham through prophecy, and he tells him, you have to take your son, your one and only son, the one that you love, and you will sacrifice him as a burnt offering on one of the mountains that I'm going to show you. Where does Hashem show Abraham the mountain? Does he specify which one? Does he give it a name? Does he tell him you've walked far enough, you've come far enough? So how does this occur to Abraham? The ram is already after he has Yitzchak tied up. In other words, he's already identified the place, and Hashem sends him a substitute. He's about to do, so he's done everything he's supposed to do. The proof, the ram comes as an alternative, and he takes this ram instead. But he identified the place. In other words, let's say, put it this way, the ram wouldn't have appeared if he had gotten the place wrong. How does he perceive? How does he recognize the right mountain? So we're not exactly told in the Mikra, it's alluded to in the Pasuk, right? So as they're traveling, Abraham is traveling, this is already a few days out, and he sees the place from a distance. So he sees something. And what does he do as soon as he sees something? The next Pasuk? Well, exactly. No, this is it. Even before he gets there. Abraham says to his the young men accompanying him, you stay here. So why do they have to stay here? As he all of a sudden he sees this is the right place. And he tells who are the Narim, by the way, the Midrash explains very simply. Ishmael and Eliezer. Abraham says to the two of them, you stay here, wait until I go with Yitzchak, we're going to prostrate ourselves over there, and then we'll come back. So here's an interesting question, right? I don't know how much Abraham and Yitzchak ate, I doubt it was a lot. What's the point of bringing Ishmael and Eliezer with you if they don't come, they don't accompany you? They just walk with you and then they just wait until you're done and they come back? I mean, why bring them at all?
So that Yitzchak wouldn't know what's going to happen.
Well, if he suspected a sacrifice was going to be brought, even then he probably would have assumed it was an animal. At some point, he must have known. There's just discussions, in fact, at what point he did know. The Midrash explains like this. We're missing some information. So on this third day they're walking. Abraham lifts his eyes, and he sees this place from a distance already. He can tell this is the right place. How can he tell? Says the Midrash. He saw the Shekhinah. So he saw the Shekhinah. He saw a curtain. He saw a neon sign. He saw, road like landmarks. He saw a road map. He
Is it
saw,
like the cloud?
you are here, like in the
They were
mall.
seeing in the desert?
So he perceives the Shekhinah. And perhaps he's not 1,000% sure or 1,000% convinced, or maybe he was trying to test them. So the Midrash says, he sees this place from a distance. He says to Yitzchak, what do you see? He says, that's a very special place. I see the Shekhinah is present here, that's the place we have to go to. Ishmael and Eliezer, Abraham turns to them, he says to them, do you see anything special? And they said to him, no. So he said, if that's the case, Shavu lachem po im ha'chamor. How does he put this? You sit here along with the donkey. As if they were going to stay without the donkey. Like we're in the middle of a desert. You want me to just stand here doing nothing? We'll play cards? So Abraham said to them, you stay here with the hamor. Explains the Midrash, what he's telling them is the difference between what I see and what Yitzchak sees and your inability to see. Same difference between this hamor and your normal human being. In other words, we as people perceive things differently than animals. We communicate, we pick up on different things. We have language, body language, illusions. With the blink of an eye, with a quick wink, you can kind of pick up on things. And animals don't have this delicate social radar. The difference between a human being and an animal is the same qualitative difference there is between a regular human being and a prophet. Because the prophet sees things that you don't see. And he perceives them clearly, or she perceives them clearly. It's not like they guess. It's not like they have, too much by way of doubts or discussions about this. Over there, David, the far wall. So, Abraham tells him, I perceive something unique. Yitzchak perceives the same thing. Clearly the two of you don't perceive it, which means you're probably not meant to come with us beyond this point. I'm going to deduce that if you can't see it and you can't perceive it, it's probably not something that was meant to us. Probably not something that was destined for you, that was meant for you to pick up. And so, he makes this determination. So, it was something you could perceive if you were attuned to it. And it was probably something that Ishmael and Eliezer could stand on the mountain itself and still not pick up. Subliminal kind of energy, if you want to call it. I don't know how else to put it. But such is the nature of the Shekhinah. So here is an interesting concept, and this is one beautiful teaching by the Zohar Kadosh out of many. Zohar says like this. You look at the pasuk that begins with the letter Nun, right? Noda b'sharim ba'ala b'shivto im ziknei aretz. So, what exactly does that mean? Noda b'sharim ba'ala. Literally, the pasuk reads, her husband. So, in the grander context of Hakadosh Baruch Hu and the Jewish nation, her husband Noda b'sharim ba'ala. He is known at the gates. Meaning, when you walk into a city, people will recognize him and say, hey, this is your husband, someone famous, someone well-known, etc. So, just like a celebrity would be recognized wherever he or she goes, so too, the name of Hashem is known everywhere. Am Yisrael is in fact the one that made the name of Hashem known and discussed, a household name everywhere. Christians and the Muslims still ultimately refer back to the same God, and we're the ones who began this monotheistic process. The Zohar reads differently. The Zohar doesn't read Noda b'sharim ba'ala. Her husband is known at the gates, meaning at all gates. Zohar reads Noda b'shi'urim ba'ala, meaning the word sha'ar in Hebrew means a gate. Sha'ar also means a number of things in Hebrew. It refers, for example, to a rate, like exchange rates. So figuratively we refer to this as a sha'ar. Yoker ha'sha'arim. Chazal described the period building up to the revelation of Mashiach as a period in which the prices of the commodities go wild, right? And maybe they predicted the taxes being out of control too. the sha'ar would be, the sha'ar of wheat or the sha'ar of barley, the rate at which they trade, the amount of money you would pay for a bushel of wheat, for these standard quantities. Today, when they discuss exchange rates for currency, they say what's called the sha'ar hayatzi, the representative exchange rate. So this is the gate that you have to go through. If you want to exchange dollars for Swiss francs, there's a rate that's currently determined more or less by the market, or closely manipulated by the Swiss government, but for all intents and purposes, there's a market for it. And you would go through this gate. This is the ratio. This is the way the currencies are exchanged. Less than this, it won't work. More than this, it won't work. This is where there's a meeting of the two sides. So, shi'ur in Hebrew means a portion. A portion in many contexts, a requisite portion. So shi'urim would be like in amounts. A shi'ur Torah, for example, generally has some kind of a defined beginning and end, like it's a portion, it's a certain chunk of Torah. It's not everything, but it's not nothing. You cover a topic. It's a certain portion of time that you dedicate to learning. So Noda b'shi'urim ba'ala, says the Zohar, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is known, so to speak, through measurements. Through measurements. That's a unique take on godliness. Goes on to explain that the measurements associated with mitzvot are how we achieve, how we make the Shekhinah present in Olam Hazeh. So, for example, if the Gemara tells you that your lulav needs to be a certain length, your etrog needs to have a certain volume to it, the tefillin need to be of a certain size, in order to make a bracha you need to eat or drink a certain quantity, Birkat HaMazon, the lengths of time. How long does it take for the stars to come out after the sun sets? How long do you have before the dawn until the sun rises, etc.? Halakha gets very, very technical. And these technical details are very often the source of these perennial critiques of Judaism. The Christians love this, for example. The fact that the Jews seem so obsessive-compulsive about the Ravit Kos being 82 or 83 milliliters, about the Kazait being 26.5 or 27 grams. It sounds so technical as to be almost alienating. So if you put this in human terms, if I were to tell my wife, listen, I love you a lot, how much do I love you? I love you like 3.5 to 4 grams of, gold. 3.5 to 4, why not 5 or 10? And I could say, sure, 3.5 is more than 1 or 2. So it sounds sometimes almost arbitrary or random that you should associate a number with something, as if to say this and no more or no less. And lo and behold, halakha is full of these concepts, absolutely full of them. What do we consider a halachic hour? What do we consider, how you fulfill your obligation to give tzedakah? How do you fulfill your obligation to build a sukkah? Tefillin, tzitzit, the length of a talit, the size of a talit has to be such that it covers the head and most of the back of a 9-year-old child, etc. Halakha is full of this. How exactly does that make sense? How does this jive with a God that is completely infinite, that has no form, no shape, no tangible aspect to him, in the sense that we refer to Hashem as masculine? Masculine or feminine doesn't really make sense. What's the significance of these concepts? How does any of that bring us closer to God, or for that matter, not distance us from God? In other words, to play the devil's advocate, you mean to tell me that if I drank 79 milliliters of wine, that I didn't fulfill my obligation? What if I'm intoxicated after 40 or 50? You mean to tell me that if I drink an ounce of liquor, I haven't fulfilled my obligation to make Kiddush on Friday night, but if I drink a cup of wine, I have? So you have many, many examples of such questions that you could ask, and very often you'll find people, non-observant Jews or non-Jews of all kinds, who poke fun at these things. So the Zohar's explanation is like this, and it's a powerful one. We live in a finite world. We live in a world where spiritual concepts are somewhat detached from reality. It's very difficult for us to make sense of them when we discuss them. In other words, you have religions. The Buddhist philosophy is much more like this. Spirituality is just very distant, very difficult to achieve. All these high levels that you can discuss. Not all that much by way of practical expectations or practical pieces of advice or lifestyle suggestions, whereas halakha seems to be pretty thorough and detailed in that sense. What's the purpose of halakha? The purpose of halakha is to bring us closer to an understanding of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and to bring the Shekhinah into our lives. How does this happen? This happens by doing things of significance, things that are meaningful. In other words, if Chazal said that a kazait is like the minimum amount that a person needs to eat in order to be considered some significant snack, a significant snack. A kazait is exactly an ounce, almost exactly an ounce. So secular society appreciates this as a unit. They sell spices by the ounce, they have plenty of things, even by the way, gold and silver in commodities market are still sold by the ounce. So what exactly does that mean? It means that in order for us to achieve something significant, in other words, if I want to offer somebody a snack, less than a kazait is kind of insulting. But you have 27 grams of something, 28 grams of something, and you walk away feeling less hungry than you did before. 1 or 2 potato chips is not going to do it. 1 or 2 pieces of popcorn doesn't get you that far. The ounce is like a somewhat universal standard. Since that's what's meaningful to us as people, we need to capture that moment. We need to mark that transition by associating it with Hashem. In other words, if I had a nibble, a little snack, I can make a bracha beforehand. That's midrabanan. If I want to eat bread and make birkat hamazon, it has to be something significant. So it has to be something meaningful for me. These amounts, these weights, these measures of volume, these lengths of time, are how we can capture meaningful concepts, meaningful items in Olam Hazeh. And because they're meaningful to us and they give us something, they mean something to us, they're like a stepping stone that brings you one step closer to Hashem if you can associate Hashem with what it is that you're experiencing. So if, for example, I have a little snack and I say, wow, the snack has flavor, it has taste to it, so I can have a gram and appreciate the taste. After I have an ounce, I feel like I've eaten something significant. At that moment, I can say, I ate something significant. God's the one who created this thing and who gave me, such bounty as I can afford a bag of potato chips. Potato chips make me happy. They make me satiated. Therefore, I'm going to make a bracha hurma and connect that with it. And in fact, you'll find that most of the brachot hanehenin have some kind of amount or limit associated with them. And because these concepts basically are like a vessel for you to make appreciative connections, to make substantial, significant connections and associations with the one who gave you your senses and the ability to perceive and even enjoy Olam Hazeh. So a day is defined by halakha. Some days are happy, some days are fast days. But to go through an entire day from beginning to end with a certain mood, you've accomplished something. It's the day as defined by halakha. Say, for example, Tisha B'Av, a bit of a downer day, but it wouldn't be Tisha B'Av if it was half a day. It wouldn't have the same impact, wouldn't have the same significance. So by observing the halakha that applies to each and every one of these areas of halakha, you come to appreciate significance, what's meaningful, what means something, what amounts to something. And out of this you can appreciate Hashem. If you're constantly fasting, constantly depriving yourself of contact with the physical world, you're kind of missing something. And even if you'd like to, Shabbat is actually the time to indulge. Shabbat is the time to eat more than you usually do, drink more than you usually do, kind of go beyond these limits. You have a controlled calorie count or a portion-controlled diet during the week. Shabbat's where we kind of loosen the belt a little bit. These halachic measures are so significant that by observing halakha, there is a connection to the Shekhinah, and it's not that the Shekhinah itself is quantifiable, it's that what you need in order to achieve it is. Because the reality is the rest of your life is quantifiable too. Just about everything we do, every food, every drink, whatever you buy, whatever you consume, whatever you trade, whatever you exchange, has some kind of a measure and a limit to it, because Olam Hazeh is full of these things. Resources are finite, We pay for things. The rarer they are, the more valuable they are. The more common they are, the less valuable, etc. And these units, therefore, have a great significance to us. And so Chazal used these units in order to help us capture the Shekhinah. So the difference between me being hungry and me being calmed from my hunger is a significant step. Eating and actually being full, this is Birkat HaMazon. And so Chazal gave you an amount. This is about how much a person needs to eat in order to feel this feeling that you need to feel in order to make Birkat HaMazon. Can you make Birkat HaMazon if you're still hungry? Interesting question that the poskim raised. I mean, at the end of the day, they gave it a limit. But if the idea is that you eat, and not only are you calmed down, like I had nibbled on a little snack, it'll hold me over the train ride until I get wherever I need to go and have lunch. You ate something and you came out satiated. This feeling of satiety gives you an idea of what it's like not to be hungry. Is there a place at which we're told we will never be hungry again? In Olam Haba. In Olam Haba, where there is no hunger, no thirst, no illness, no discomfort, you've just reached a point where you alleviated the sense of hunger from yourself for a little bit. Now you can make a bracha, perhaps the only opportunity that you have to make a bracha, from a place in Olam Hazeh that's almost as close as you're going to get to Olam Haba. Because you're not bothered by your hunger. Incidentally, we have this concept of the bracha b'asher yatzar. So one who needs to relieve him or herself, it's a pretty unpleasant feeling. And once you relieve yourself of this discomfort, you find yourself, well, relieved, right? I mean, the restroom, they call this in English, Bet al-Raha in Arabic also. It's like the room of nahat, of contentment. So what's so restful about a restroom? I mean, it gives you a reprieve from your otherwise uncomfortable situation. And once you rid yourself of something uncomfortable, all of a sudden, you feel good. You feel good. This feeling of relief, Chazal associated a bracha with. Because it's a step closer to understanding what it's like to be in Olam Haba, where you're not hindered by any of these physical boundaries, these physical barriers. Very interesting concept. The idea, in fact, Chazal said, En simcha k'atarat ha'sfekot. In a spiritual sense, when someone's debating something, someone's wondering about something, should I do this, should I do that, should I go left, should I go right, should I go here, should I go there, it weighs you down and it troubles you. Once you make a decision, the Gemara says there's no joy like the joy of alleviating some kind of doubt, relieving yourself of some form of doubt. So in a spiritual sense, it's something uncomfortable, it's a distraction, it weighs you down, it sucks your energy, and once you rid yourself of it, you feel enlightened, your eyes are open, it's like, wow, I can't believe it took me this long to do it. So the idea of halakha is full of shiurim, it's full of these concepts. What it means, these measurements, these quantities are actually a way of capturing some aspect of godliness, or at least relieving yourself of some aspect of human limitation in order to do something significant or important. When it comes to the lulav, the tefillin, the tzitzit, the size of these things has to be significant enough that you can actually appreciate them, and hopefully appreciate what's behind them. But that's the general bigger picture. You come closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, not by ignoring Olam Hazeh, but by appreciating the power behind the food and the drink that Hashem gave you, the relief that you can, or the benefit, the pleasure that you can derive coming into contact with the physical world and using it in a productive way to kind of propel you towards that little taste of Olam Haba, where you're pleased, you smell something pleasant, eat something pleasant, drink something pleasant, you're relieved of hunger, relieved of waste. Those are little godly moments that we can take advantage of and bring ourselves closer to spirituality, even if temporarily. Take a quick break, we'll do some halakha afterwards, a little bit behind actually halakha. If we're doing it today, if you are so inclined.